This is From Both Sides, a spontaneous, free-flowing conversation featuring a dynamic team of women, providing insights into both political and civic events affecting the lives of women throughout Pennsylvania. And now, here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of From Both Sides. I'm Michele Sellitto, your host, and today we'll discuss the most interesting, the most analyzed, and the most engaging presidential election in decades, and how these results may affect you and Pennsylvania families. Today joining me is my guest co-host, Carol Aichele. Carol is a former elected official herself, former Chester County Commissioner, and former Secretary of the Commonwealth under Governor Corbett. Welcome, Carol.
I'm delighted to be here, and this will be an interesting session.
Yes, it will, and I know that you have a lot of thoughts about the political process and government just as I do, so thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
Today, I'd like to introduce our two guests. We have two state representatives joining us today. First, State Representative Marguerite Quinn. She represents the 143rd Legislative District, Bucks County. She is the Deputy Chair for the House Majority Policy Committee, and she's got 5 terms under her belt, currently running for re-election. Welcome, Representative Quinn. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
And on the Democratic side, we have State Representative Margo Davidson. State Representative Davidson represents the 164th Legislative District, Delaware County.
That's right.
And she is the first woman elected to that district and the first Afro-American elected to that district.
And the first Democrat.
Oh, the first Democrat, even better,
it's
even
a
better.
trifecta.
Okay, it is indeed. Margo has 3 terms under her belt and is currently also running for re-election. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, I wanted to start off the conversation by just saying, have you ever seen anything like this? I mean, what is going on in this country with this presidential election? What do you think?
Well, I have been at 3 presidential conventions during the course of my lifetime, and I must say, this is the most bizarre presidential season that I have ever seen in my life, and I've covered them as a news reporter, and this is just unpredictable. Never before in history could the kind of outlandish things that have been said during the course of this particular election been said, and a candidate still be in the race. I remember Dukakis took the wrong kind of picture, and his political aspirations went down the tubes. People have said the most outlandish things and taken the most outlandish photos, and still going strong.
Still survived. You're talking about Republicans now, mainly, right? You're not really talking about Democrats.
Well, Saturday Night Live has done a good job of spoofing a number of candidates, and their take on Bernie Sanders is the crazy old grandfather. And the way they or the scientist or mad scientist or something, and so it's been bizarre on the Democratic side as well.
Representative Quinn, what do you think about this? Because some of this discussion and some of the kind of outlandish acts have been really on the Republican side. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that, let me just back up. I've never been to a convention. I may be to one this year. I'm actually running as a delegate. I'm one of 7 people running for 3 spots in Bucks County to represent the Republicans. And as bizarre as it is, I think we need to look at the parallel of the changing times and the changing media market, and how people are getting their news and what comes to them. I think bullet points, Snapchats, YouTube, all of these little pieces just feed in and play again and again and again some of the outlandish statements that you have, that you reference. I don't know that if something like this has happened in the past, it certainly would never have made it bubbled up to headlines like it does today with the media market.
Oh, I see. So what you're saying is by the kind of technology and the kind of coverage and everything that we're given, it just brings it more to the surface. But isn't there something, though, that is driving people? I mean, what is driving people to continue to support people who are doing and saying things that we generally have thought were inappropriate? What is driving people? What's motivating people?
I think there is a backlash against what we call political correctness. And people tend to or are tending to gravitate towards people that say what they are thinking at the moment and not care what the political ramifications are. And so on the Democratic side, and again, I'm not picking on Bernie Sanders. He's an amazing man and has done a lot of great work. But you wouldn't think that someone who's a declared socialist would have the kind of standing that they currently have. And he's really on Hillary Clinton's heels. I mean, he does have to do a lot in order to win the nomination, but he's only 200 delegates behind. And there's 189, I believe, in New York at stake, and then you have Pennsylvania. And I may be mixing up the two delegate counts, but there's still room, for him to be, and he is very competitive. So, there seems to be a real backlash. We're talking about the outsider getting, more attention, the insurgent candidate. And so, and that's resonating with people, and we see it. Will it get them to the nomination? We'll have to wait and see.
Representative, don't you think people are just hungering for a genuine candidate? With Bernie Sanders, what you see is what you get.
Yes.
And the positions he's talking about now are the same positions he's represented for years.
Yes.
Let's flip it over to the Republican side. Donald Trump. What you see is what you get. And he's not trying to be someone he's not. And sometimes in politics, people who run for public office, and it's very hard to do, try to be someone you're not. And I think the American public now looks at that pretty carefully. Think of the presidents we've had in the last 20 years. Jimmy Carter was a genuine human. He was exactly as he portrayed himself. Ronald Reagan.
Well, I think that's one of the downsides of Hillary Clinton. People see her as calculating and positioning herself, because if you've been in political life like all of us have been, you realize that you can't just say anything at any point, or at least I've learned that over the years. You can't just, I would never say some of the things that these people are saying, and my husband wouldn't have been reelected probably. But I just think that people are hungering for that. But yet, if you're in public office, I think you realize that you need to have more respect for people than those folks have. So I just can't understand what is driving those folks, unless they are just simply tired of the same old thing and they think government just doesn't work anymore.
Well, I don't know how Marguerite feels about it, but I do think that people are hungry for genuine elected officials, people that they feel as though they can trust. There's so much corruption in politics. There's so much polarization that people want to know where you stand and not feel betrayed once you're in office.
As a former journalist, when you watch the debates, Chris Christie said that even in New Jersey, the questions that the interviewers were asking were rude. Is there a line? There are questions that are asked of candidates today that would not have been asked 20 years ago. And just talk a minute about...
Well, the state of journalism...
Maybe I should go like this. What was the most outrageous question you've ever been asked as a candidate for public office? One pops right into my mind.
Well, tell me yours while I think about mine.
I think I've been asked what my children thought was important to the youth vote. And I thought, this isn't part of my candidacy for the school board. I was asked questions about my position on pro-life, pro-choice. I'm running for a school director's position.
I've been asked what my husband thinks. Is your husband okay with you doing this? As if I needed his permission, or as if I've gone rogue in a relationship.
Excellent point. People ask me, what does your husband's law firm think about your position?
I've also been offered by local. He was an elected official at the time, but he said he'd be happy to ask his wife to get some of her lady friends so we could speak some female issues.
Oh.
And my response was, you can imagine the response. I'm sure that she balances a checkbook and helps to pay tuitions, and she cares about job creation and everything else. And I think that too often, be it the media or anyone else, thinks that we as female elected officials get together, that we're concerned only about women's issues with regard to women's reproductive health and things like that, when quite frankly, I've got 2 daughters that I'd like to have them come back to Pennsylvania for jobs. Mm-hmm. I've got a granddaughter. I've got 3 stepkids out living in another part of the country. I'd like to see a viable Pennsylvania with our pension situation under control, so that, I'm not saying, oh gosh, mom's taxes are going to go up and as a widow. And I think that it's important as we get into this presidential race that we realize the women's vote is not pigeonholed on certain issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I would always wish I would have a man on the show and ask him what his wife thinks of, or something about his dress. Wouldn't that be fun to do? Just kind of flip the tables.
And that reminded me of a question I was asked was, who's going to watch your children while you're going back and forth to Harrisburg? Mm-hmm. And, I don't know if a man would ever be asked, who's going to watch your children while you go to work and do your job? Mm-hmm. So I thought that was bizarre.
Wouldn't be.
No.
No, I definitely think it's tougher for women to run for elected office, and it's even. I found myself in a position. My former husband was a state senator, and people would ask me questions and then kind of evaluate him on my answers, which I think is really totally inappropriate. Well, do you think that based on what you said, do you think then there's one candidate that especially stands out to women in this race?
Well, I think, of course, Hillary Clinton stands out. She's the only female left in the race, and she's on the Democratic side. And I just remember last cycle when she ran against Barack Obama and the enormous amount of time that was spent on what she was wearing, as opposed to the issues that she was espousing, even at that point in her political life, where she had quite a track record, quite a history of representing different issues and fighting for different issues. But we were talking about her pantsuits and what she was wearing, and did she look tired, and who did her makeup, who did her hair, and it was really exhausting.
Well, and frankly, I think she's the candidate that has the best positions and the most detailed positions, so far in this race. But at this point, let's take a break, and we're going to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
From Both Sides is a production of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy and is made possible by the support of the Pennsylvania Center for Women and Politics at Chatham University, a nonpartisan center devoted to fostering women's public leadership through education, empowerment, and action. The first to focus on women's political involvement in Pennsylvania, the center integrates disciplinary knowledge, civic education, and capacity building, while examining the intersection of women and public policy. From Both Sides is also supported as a public service by Saul Ewing LLP, a law firm with a 100-year tradition of serving the needs of business, government, education, healthcare, technology, and manufacturing in our region. And by the University Center for International Studies, the engine for extending the global reach of the University of Pittsburgh and its students. From Both Sides is also sponsored by Dr. Wendell Funk, one of Central Pennsylvania's most experienced cosmetic plastic surgeons. Dr. Funk is a leader in new and innovative non-invasive procedures like cool sculpting. His long-term experience with all types of cosmetic surgery, as well as facial injectables, keeps new and repeat patients returning to his practice in Lancaster, York, and Camp Hill. From Both Sides is also sponsored by the Ed and Jeannie Arnold Foundation.
Welcome back to From Both Sides. Today we're talking with State Representative Marguerite Quinn and State Representative Margo Davidson. Carol, you want to take it away?
I'm very curious to know what is being talked about in Democratic circles and Republican circles with respect to a relevant primary here in Pennsylvania. Usually our primary is so late that the candidates have already been chosen by the time Pennsylvanians get around to voting. What are you hearing when because you're both running for public office, what are people telling you?
Well, what I'm hearing is, it's more interesting what I'm not hearing. In the past couple of elections, and this will be the third presidential election as I've been in office, there were bills that were circulating at this time to change the date of Pennsylvania's primary, to make it relevant. Obviously, that's not the case right now. It's people are chomping at the bit that Pennsylvania very well could finally have a say in the presidential candidate.
And I do believe it's a little earlier. Pennsylvania is a little earlier this year. It's in April. I remember
Yes.
past primaries
True.
are in May, late May. But we still were not sure we were going to be relevant by the time the candidates rolled into Pennsylvania. We were relevant in 2008. I remember Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama
absolutely.
were in a tough battle. The Republican primary was pretty much over, but the Democratic side, it was still very much in play. And Hillary Clinton, of course, won Pennsylvania in that year. So I think people are excited to weigh in, and I'm hoping turnout will reflect what I'm hearing. People want to make the choice and have their say on who becomes the nominee for the Democratic Party. I know.
I think some of this really depends on what happens in New York next week, because I think that's really big stakes. If Hillary Clinton doesn't pull it off there, I think Pennsylvania then has more weight, because she'll still be trying to seek, the number of delegates before we go to convention. But it's interesting, Representative Quinn, you're running as a Republican delegate for the
Correct.
National Convention. You don't have to commit to a candidate, do you?
In fact, I run uncommitted.
You run all Republicans. You don't have to do that. Is that correct?
The majority of them run uncommitted. Now, that doesn't mean that some people don't commit. Right now, I think that if I was given the privilege to serve the people of the 8th Congressional District, that I ought to wait till the 26th of April and see what it is, who it is that they want to support.
Yeah, the Democratic Party is somewhat different. We have to commit. So on the ballot will be my name, Michele Sellitto, committed to Hillary Clinton. And so our voters will vote knowing that if they're voting for me, I am pledged to Hillary Clinton, at least for the first round.
What I'm hearing feedback right now is, first of all, most people do not understand this whole process.
Delegates.
I've had to walk my office staff through it just because, first of all, when these calls come in, that's a legislative office. These are political discussions, so they need to refer it over to Bucks County Republican headquarters. But in the meantime, they're saying, we don't get it. What's happening with it? So, just stepping people through, I think that many constituents are concerned that the voice of the electorate will be manipulated. And I believe that there's some talk shows out there, some circles that are saying, it doesn't even matter because since I don't even know if I'll be elected to it, but obviously you're on the ballot, you hope to be. But since we're uncommitted, there's a fire that's being fanned indicating that whatever the party leaders are going to do, they're going to manipulate the process. And quite frankly, if I'm going to Cleveland, it's to represent my district.
Well, we were talking earlier about the history of the delegate process. And the history of the delegate process is actually to be able to guide that vote so that the ordinary folks make the right decisions. Carol or Margo, do you want to chime in on that? I know we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, there are a number of interesting dynamics there because historically the party leaders would determine who the presidential nominee was for their party, and they did it through the delegate process. And so delegates were usually chosen by party leaders, so they were favored with delegate status, and so they were loyal to the party leaders, and they pretty much did what the party leaders wanted them to do, what they thought was in the best interest of the party and would give them the greatest shot at victory. And so that process is really a lot different from what the will of the people, so to speak. And so now that we have social media and people are starting to look into this process and seeing that, you know, their voice isn't as well heard as they would like it to be because of the delegate process. And, you know, some delegates are not committed. So who are they committed to? Are they committed to the Republican leaders? Are they committed to a particular candidate? So it's a very interesting process. And every presidential cycle, journalists get really excited about whether or not there's going to be a contested convention. I mean, they live for that. You know, it's like they just want it to be. And, you know, there's always these predictions that there's going to be.
Well, they're going to be
this
happy
might
this
be
year.
this
Yeah,
year.
this
Yeah, so they
will be
finally get this dream scenario.
Yes.
Juicy stuff.
Yes, that they've been hoping for decades now, and there hasn't been one, I think, in decades. And so now, it's the party leaders that decide.
What I found is that many of the people with whom I speak don't realize how many people are on the Republican presidential ballot. There are 6 names.
Oh, because they were still on the, they still made it the ballot because they didn't know they would be out by now.
Pennsylvania ballot.
Is that right?
People will have the option to vote for Trump, Kasich, Cruz, Rubio, Carson, and Jeb Bush.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Isn't that going to even confuse things more for
certainly
Republicans?
will.
Oh my goodness, I feel so sorry for you. But yeah, no. Well, even Donald Trump is now, trying to get people revved up and say the process is unfair. If I've got all these votes, it shouldn't matter what these superdelegates think. And some people don't even understand who superdelegates are and why they are. I know in our party, the superdelegates, do you have superdelegates?
No.
The Republicans? No.
No.
Well, our superdelegates are, for example, they will be Senator Casey, Governor Wolf, leading officials. In fact, for the first time, I believe, many elected officials, both senators, statewide elected officials, are actually running on the ballot to be delegates because they don't have superdelegate status because the Democratic Party has less delegates than they have had in the past. And apparently the number of delegates are based on the number of congressmen you have. So it really is a very complex process. And if we have trouble figuring out, I don't know how anybody else can figure it out.
Right.
Well, since it hasn't been in play in so long, people haven't really had to pay attention.
The last brokered convention, even if it came close to being a brokered convention, was between Ronald Reagan and Gerald Ford in 1976. But that's the only time in, I think, our lifetime where it's been close. Democrats had kind of a rough go, I think, with Adlai Stevenson in 1954, probably before you were born.
Right.
And then there was a little bit of a dust-up with Ted Kennedy and Jimmy Carter in 1980. But that was resolved, and I think it was in a professional political way.
So for the viewers, if you don't get the number of votes needed by the time the convention begins, that's when it goes to a vote, and that's when it's considered contested. And then if it isn't resolved in that first vote, then it's considered brokered. So that's when it's brokered, and then there is all kinds of negotiations, I think, to bring people around.
Dare we say deals made?
We dare say. Yes. Although the interesting part is, I don't think that party leaders have anything to dole out the way they did many, many years ago.
They'll find
I'm sure they'll.
Think
that's
they
about
will?
to say the same thing, Carol. They'll find something.
We were looking
perceived.
at this in my county, and we did kind of a straw vote, and it was, let's say, 34% for Donald Trump, 33% for Ted Cruz, and 32% for John Kasich. So the press headline is Donald Trump leads in Chester County. But the fact of the matter is 66% did not vote for Donald Trump.
Right.
So his argument that a plurality should make you the nominee is, first, it's inconsistent with the rules, but
Yeah.
a plurality would not lead to a unified party coming out of the convention. You need a majority.
And that's what I've been saying for months since this has played out, and the Republican side has so many candidates. Really, most Republicans are voting against Donald Trump. When you combine,
There's some voting against others.
Yes, I mean, but I'm saying if you combine all the votes that other people get and combine that against what he gets, there are more people that have chosen someone other than Trump in the Republican Party. He's still getting 30% of the vote, 40% of the vote. So the majority of Republican voters have not chosen Trump to be their leader. So I think that makes the plurality rule more valid, because a large amount of voters are not voting for Donald Trump. A large number are, but more are not. They're voting for other candidates.
Well, to sum this up, do you think that, I'll ask both of you, each of you, will your party be able to rally its voters around whoever is the presidential nominee to win the election? Marguerite?
I certainly hope so.
Margo?
I do. I don't think that most Democrats find either of the candidates so objectionable that they'll stay home. There's a number of people that have a problem with Hillary Clinton, so they see Bernie as an alternative. But that's not to say that they wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I think most of the polling bears that out.
Okay, well, I think one of the things I think Hillary should think about is how to announce that Bernie Sanders is going to be her vice presidential candidate and really bring the country together. I think that might do it for our side.
This is a bold announcement.
Right.
Yes,
I was
yes.
thinking that. I was
Just
thinking
a
that.
recommendation, Hillary. So it's been a
I'm
great
sure she's
conversation.
watching, yes.
A great conversation. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the viewers for joining us. And stay tuned, because we're going to have to do another show here and talk about the results of the election after this. But I thank the viewers for joining us. And as women in Pennsylvania, despite our political differences, we know that there's much more that unites us than divides us. Thank you.